Traveling anywhere, normally, is filled with exciting anticipation. I knew this trip would be distinctly different, and certainly a distinctly different experience. Hello, I'm Henry Biernacki, author, airline captain, and world traveler. May I introduce you to the many faces of North Korea. I wanted to travel to North Korea because of the solitude of the country itself. And literally, nobody knows anything about it. As I exited customs immigration, I was immediately met by my three guides, Yu, An, and Rim. They'd be my constant companions the entire time I was there. Anywhere I went, if I went to the bathroom, they followed me. The only time I was literally alone without my guides was when I slept. I was asked by Yu for my passport, an unusual request, but I guess for North Korea it was kind of normal. I gave them my passport and I figured I'd just receive it back in the next couple days. But I didn't receive it back until 12 days later, and my airplane ticket when I was leaving that same day. It was clear to me that, unlike the U.S., the guides immediately began telling me about the square meters of every statue, plaza, and everything else the North Korean people made. It was clear to me then that I was there, and they were there to promote every little thing about North Korea. They would ask, from the airport into Pyongyang, have you ever seen anything so large and so beautiful, when they point out a plaza or a statue? I had to respond, no, never. This is amazing, I would say with a grin. I knew immediately I had to kind of basically go along with their words and questions about North Korea and not say anything negative. And usually I would. I'm not too politically correct. Traveling, though, through the countryside, I noticed there were no cars, only bicycles. The streets were wide and bare. And in the middle of Pyongyang, believe it or not, the capital city of North Korea, the sounds were as if they were in the forest. It was silence. People walked with their head down. They let me see 2 metro stops and ride actually in the metro. And the North Koreans were right next to me. I think the closest I ever got to a North Korean person was about 10 feet. As I got into the metro, they just kind of moved the locals away from me. Throughout the countryside as well, there was cooperative farms and signs of the great leader who was Kim Il-sung, and their dear leader is Kim Jong-il, who had just passed away. And they only barely spoke about Kim Jong-un, the son of Kim Jong-il. They spoke about him and they said he'd be the next leader. And I was there back in October of 2010. That's when I was there. And that's the 65th year of the Communism and Socialistic Party, the Workers' Party of North Korea. And they're celebrating that, and they spoke about the new leader. It would be the second son of Kim Jong-il. I was never allowed to speak directly to the North Koreans other than my guides. But what I could see was the people, when they watched me or saw me, they looked like they wanted to speak to me, but they knew they never could. I would wave from the van, and people, as they were riding their bikes, as I was waving from the van, they would turn around and ride their bikes continuously, and they would almost hit somebody because they were wondering who this guy was that was waving to them. That looked so strange and foreign from them. The children there, they watched me intently from a distance and walked back and forth from side street to side street. If I sat somewhere and I waved, they would walk back and forth waving, and although they know they couldn't come and talk to me. So the uneasy feeling of stepping into this isolated land was wearing off, and what really took its place was this feeling of exhaustion, just because mentally they were continuously, my three guides, not in a bad way, it was just constantly pushing on their ideologies of North Korean lifestyle. I thought I was an accelerated North Korean history class, believe it or not. They would give me every date, and I was writing down as much as I could in case I wanted to write articles about it, but it wears you down continuously. From 7 in the morning till about 8 o'clock at night, you're with them, and you only get free time in your hotel room. It felt like I was working continuously. Again, the children, they seemed cautious, even by looking at me, but when I waved first, their smiles really told me that they were friendly. And I wish I could have actually spoken to some of them, but I think they would have gotten in trouble. But I could tell they were interested in somebody that was not from there. Although some people think it's wrong to visit a place such as North Korea, I believe exposure to something new from the people there and to me, and them exposing me to their life, both people are learning in a positive manner. In general, the people didn't want to question anything there. My guides told me they love their leaders, and literally the people worship their leaders. And my guides never said anything negative about Kim Jong-il or Kim Il-sung, who had passed away in the 90s. Very nationalistic. It's because they really do not know anything outside their borders. They're not giving any newspapers. The newspapers obviously are printed how the government wants them to be read. When I was in South Korea, it's very different than the North Koreans. The South Koreans, they have the ability to travel and see something new. And so their egocentricness and pride, I believe, is ignorance. But the North Koreans, they have no ability to travel and see something new. There are plenty of statues, mosaics, and paintings of the leaders, smiling with little kids and basically helping guide the country. You could see that they were pointing and telling people how to build bridges, and they would always say, oh, the great leader helped us build this dam. This building is because he helped construct it. They didn't really talk much about the other countries except in a negative way. If you heard anything about Japan, they really did not like Japan because of what the Japanese did during the war. Anybody during the war they just didn't like, and they would just constantly say North Korea won the war because of this. And we would go into a military museum. The kids that were there looking around, they were dressed in military uniforms, and they would show all the military planes, guns, flags that they captured from the other countries and say, this is how we know we won the war. Then we went to the DMZ line, and the DMZ, I didn't know this, but it's actually 4 kilometers wide. Dividing the DMZ is what they call the military demarcation line. And you actually enter the military demarcation line. First, you have to hand in your passports, which our guides did. They are really watching our guides so they don't run across the line. Literally, you are looking at South Korea. And most people see this military demarcation line from the South Korean side looking into North Korea. But I was in North Korea looking at South Korea, and you can see all the cameras everywhere, and it was pretty aggressive. And it was right before the bombings in South Korea. You could feel the tension there at that time. And we also went to the area where they signed the armistice treaty to stop the war, discontinue it for that time. Like, the war is actually still going on, but nobody's fighting. But the DMZ line is literally always quite filled with aggressiveness, is what our guides had told me. And then from the DMZ, we actually went back. We've traveled all through North Korea, and then we went to the Mayday Stadium, and we saw the performing arts of the Arirang Mass Games. They spend their whole life training for this, and literally it is 30,000 people. They flip cards of basically a huge mosaic, and they flip from paintings, and it looks like a painting, but it's actually it's all painted on a card. But everybody's doing their part, and it looks like a big mountainside or a sunrise or the North Korean flag. And they start from children all the way up to adults, and they start these to learn how to do the card stunts. And what the Arirang Mass Games actually promote is they're praising the Workers' Party of North Korea, its armed forces, and their leader's kid is quite extraordinary. What I came away thinking as the usual lifestyle of the North Korean people, again, I could never talk to them, but what I viewed was their daily life was basic necessities. Their world really is nothing. They don't understand the concept of work and money. Everybody is given the exact same thing except the government officials. You can see the government officials. They're not as skinny as the locals. They're obviously well fed. The people, the everyday people who actually work, they have nothing, but the government people have everything. Which, that sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? Our governments around the world, these government officials think they're owed something. I don't necessarily think the North Korean government is doing anything different, except not allowing their people to work hard, but our government's doing the same thing. They think they're owed something for their service, and they forget they're working for us, not the other way around. There's no lights in the evening. Everything was shut off. It was still and silent. I mean, that was quite bizarre to see a large city or any city where people were walking around with flashlights, and you couldn't hear anything except these large speakers speaking Korean and promoting probably the way of life that they had already known. I then was actually invited to speak at the Grand People Studies House, and that actually can house 30 million books. If it has 30 million books, I'm not sure, but they said it could house 30 million books, and they're all translated to North Korean. But who does the translating? Obviously they are, so they're putting in their own words. But the way I looked at it is I offered to speak at such a place in North Korea, how many people actually get to travel to North Korea, and then how many people actually get to give a lecture in North Korea, and they asked me to. They wanted me to speak about what countries I had been to, why I traveled at such a young age, and what I thought of North Korea. They obviously translated, so I'm not sure what they said. And if you're wondering if I'd ever return to North Korea, it's a good question. Yes, I would. I realize governments can isolate their people through propaganda and newspapers, and the only way we're going to learn as humans and individual humans is to go out and explore, and I don't want to be isolated mentality-wise. Any exposure to something new, I believe it's going to help somebody grow, and it's going to help me grow and the people with whom I'm coming into contact, even if it's still from a distance. I believe we're both still going to learn. This is Global Henry signing off, and remember, I try to think about this every now and then. As a tourist or a traveler, we may visit a country thinking we're going to learn much about something new, and quite possibly the only entity we learn about is ourselves.